o'clock.
Welcome back, Gary.
Thank you, Rosemary.
I know you missed me.
I have missed you. Keep it brief, yeah. It's the first time ever. Thank you for those who kept the Tuesday Club going while I was away. And thank you all for coming to the last Tuesday Club of the year. Now, I was slightly late because Pam handed me a fruit cake that she had cooked for this evening, and I left it at home. So.
Go get it! Go get it!
Bob, I went back. So I nearly missed out on a beer because of you. But anyway, I was filled with inspiration about this evening's speaker when at 5 to 6 she said, "What did you want me to talk about again?" But she said to keep it to myself, so I have. But it's great for us to have Her Holiness the Mayor here, and she's going. It's actually it's workshop, not workshop. This which
better than an extinguished mayor.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Yes, I'm the extinguished mayor. But it's really important that that I've been. In fact, by the way, Lianne, I had another reason why I was late. I've always got lots of excuses for being late. At school they used to call me the late Mr. Moore. But Marcus Brandt rang me from America. You know, the People Steeple man? He's going to be here next week, and he just rang me to tell me how pissed off he was. He'd organised his ticket so he could be at the Tuesday Club next week, and they're not going to have it. So he can have it on his own. But he does want to catch up. So he does want to catch up with you, Lianne, while he's here. So, yes. So, it's really important. A number of people have commented to me around New Zealand and from other parts of the world that it's really important for a local authority to have a group like this where ideas are debated. And my old deputy mayor down there, increasingly older deputy mayor, Carol Evans, we always appreciated being able to actually have a group of people who play with an idea, because it's very hard to think ideas, public policy through at the council table or with just small groups of people. And a group like this, where you've got a wide array of views and people who are quite happy to share them even when you don't want to hear them, it's really important that this city uses this group properly. So I've said to Lianne, one of the things that I'd want her to touch on tonight, which she will have written down in her extensive notes, is what topics does she want the Tuesday Club to play with? And I know Rosemary next has said that she wants us to work as a group to see if we can get the town and country talking together about water. And it's that sort of, and that's hard, and it's the hard stuff we need to be facing, not the easy stuff. So have you written your notes down?
Oh, sort of.
I can tell a joke.
Yep.
No. Nobody wants to hear it. No, sorry. Okay. There's a cup of cold 6 days. No. All right, so without further ado, welcome, Lianne.
Ena mana, ena reo, e reo rangatira mā, tēnei te mihi kia koutou, I te kopapro te rā, tēnā koutou, tēnā rā tātou katoa. Good evening, everyone. Now, the reason I'm late, and the reason I have no notes, apart from what I've just scribbled down, once Gary reminded me what I was speaking about, was that Sarah Templeton and myself have been out at Littleton Port to go on board the Laura Bussy, which is the icebreaker, and I'm only going to mention this for 1 second because I just want you to know that we think that this is the first time an icebreaker has been named for a woman, and she is Laura Bussy was she qualified in and I can't remember what her degree was in, but she was the first woman professor in Italy. So it's such an extraordinary thing. And I just was thinking of going to the opening of the Beatrice Tinsley building earlier on this year, and actually thinking about some of the people in our history that have made dynamic contributions to the world and are being recognised many years down the track. But it was great. New Zealand enjoys this wonderful status of being one of only 5 countries in the world that is an international gateway to Antarctica, and Christchurch, of course, is one of those gateway cities. And we do value that role. So we have 4 national Antarctic programs based out of Christchurch. The New Zealand Antarctic Program, Antarctica New Zealand, the Italian Antarctic Program, the Americans, obviously USAP, they've been here for a very long time, and also the Korean Antarctic Program. We're also the home to COMNAT. Now, there is method in my madness in terms of filling in time with commenting on this. But I just want us to be thinking about what our city actually is and its place in the world as we contemplate the role that the Tuesday Club might play over the coming term of the council. So I'm just going to throw that out there, that there is more to Christchurch than its present day status. It has a history and it has an enormously fantastic future. Somebody said to me on the ship today, you know, we're built, my children are going to inherit the newest city with the most incredible assets that a city in New Zealand has ever had. You know, so it's anyway. So I just wanted to sort of start on a deeply optimistic note, but I'm going to remain there because Gary said that I was to talk about challenges for the council over the next 3 years, over the next term. And for me, challenges always present as opportunities if you look carefully enough. And I've often been quoted as saying that you know, that a crisis is an opportunity to do things that you didn't think were possible before. And we have faced a number of crises as a city, and it hasn't been that easy. So we've had the Canterbury earthquake sequence. Obviously, we've also had the floods in 2014. We had 3 1 in 200 year events within a matter of weeks. You start to lose credibility with your community when you say 1 in 200 year events, and they happen 3 times in a row. So people just stop believing the phrase. So, but we did. That's exactly what happened. But it does show you that a better understanding of the risks that we face is probably a good thing to learn from that. And then, of course, we had the Port Hills fires, which joined into a massive fire. And suddenly we realised that we're in an urban environment, but we're right on the face of a rural environment. And so the rural firefighters, which have now merged with the urban firefighters into Fire and Emergency New Zealand, you know, since the time of the fires, but they were very challenging for us. And of course, we had the 2016 earthquakes that impacted on Huranui and Kaikoura, but the interesting thing about that was the calling of a tsunami warning for us, and the challenge that posed. And of course, I'm just mentioning this because new tsunami maps have been published by ECAN and Council today, which show evacuation zones. But unless the local communities are actually developing their own evacuation plans, then it is a meaningless exercise. And so I kind of want to use this as an opportunity to think about how communities engage with each other on matters like where would you, how would you, when would you, etc. So that was just an aside because they've just come out today. And then, of course, the mosque shootings on the 15th of March this year. And if you think about that as a particular challenge that the city faced, that is not something that would have ever been imagined by me. And in fact, my first reaction to hearing the news that there had been a shooting at the mosque was not to believe the what I was reading on the Stuff website. So, and I think that there is still a sense of shock and disbelief that something of that nature happened here, and that something that belongs overseas at a very distant place from here was somehow imported into our country. It does raise a number of questions that I want us to be having conversations about as a city going forward. I guess I've had my eyes opened, having grown up in the city. I've had my eyes open to the experience of those that have lived experience of racist taunts and behaviours as they grew up in the city, and I think we need to have some open and honest conversations about those and what we would want to be as a city going forward. So that they're all of the sort of kind of the things that we've been through. But what we've got now is a great council. I'm absolutely delighted to be able to tell you that we have 16 passionate people sitting around the council table who are absolutely determined to do their best for the city as a whole. Every single one of them have said we've been elected from wards, but we are here to represent the city as a whole. And I found that really quite heartening, because that is our responsibility when we sit around the council table. Might be different around the community board table, but at the council table it is certainly the interests of the city as a whole that comes to the fore.
Will it continue to be run like a secret society?
Sorry?
Will it continue to be run like a secret society?
Perhaps you'd like to explain that.
Well, clearly every time the media asks you a question, you don't make any comment. You run like some sort of Byzantine medieval society.
Who? Me personally?
The media talk to you about ask you various questions and you can't answer them. Going back
Well, it depends on what the questions are.
Answer why she spent $31,000 extra moving out.
Business, surely.
We need to be open about it.
Okay, right, that's
Let her
enough.
finish.
Well, okay, well, we've actually got a fantastic new chief executive, and I'm absolutely
Yeah.
thrilled that we got
Yeah.
her over here. And yes, it is true that we have we've paid a small contribution towards the total moving expenses that she will be subject to. So I'm very grateful that she accepted the offer that we made. The advantage of having somebody like Dawn Baxendale is that she has brought with her a wealth of experience. Not only is this her third chief executive's role, she was actually shoulder tapped into her last chief executive's role in order to resolve some serious issues that an incredibly large city such as Birmingham was faced with. So she was the chief executive at Southampton. They shoulder tapped her into Birmingham. There were huge challenges that Birmingham was facing, one in particular related to children's services, which we don't obviously do here as a council. The central government does that. But she was able to find a mechanism for turning those services around in a way that not only improved the service but also reduced the cost to the organisation, but it actually meant that children were safer. So, so I think she brings a wealth of experience, and I'm going to encourage the Tuesday Club. I know that she's already been here, and I'm sure that she will continue to return in order to continue to debate the issues that are current in the city. In terms of the council's strategic framework, the way that we've been thinking about things, obviously one of the core factors that we've got in front of us at the moment the immediate one is that we've got an annual plan coming up, but in many respects the annual plan is just an adjustment on the third year of the last long-term plan. So what we're already doing as a council is looking forward into the long-term plan process. And somebody said today, actually, why don't we stop calling it a long-term plan? Because people die of boredom at the thought of just even, just thinking about something called a long-term plan. And so it is our opportunity, and we do this every 3 years, to really build from the ground up what the approach is going to be by the city, for the city. And one of the issues that Dawn wants to really push is whether we can start, well, she wants to start from the zero base and build from zero. And that's not saying that we want to cut everything. It's actually saying, what is it that we as a city need to do in order to be a resilient city in the 21st century? And there are many things that obviously we need to be doing. There is obviously the legislative framework that we operate under. There is also the aspirational framework that so many of our citizens want to see achieved. But it's also about being a kind city and a compassionate city, and actually being a city that extends its resolve to ensuring that this is a city that enables people to achieve their full potential, no matter where they come from, no matter what their background is, no matter what educational qualifications they have, no matter the colour of their skin, no matter the circumstances of their birth or how they worship on their day of worship. So there are some enormous things that we need to be doing as well. And then layered all over that, and it's so important when you're thinking about resilience, are the challenges in relation to climate. So we know that we've got challenges as a city and that we have to address those. We've put together a really bold statement about the City Council as an organisation being net carbon neutral by 2030, and we've asked the city to start looking at the challenge from the perspective of the whole city being net carbon neutral by 2045. Now this is slightly ahead of the agenda that's just been passed with the Zero Carbon Bill, but we are confident that if we work with people and take people with us, then it is something that is achievable. And I don't think setting unachievable targets is what we should be doing. I think we should be aiming for what is achievable. We've got a number of other issues that we still need to confront. We've got a number of projects that are essential to complete as part of that push for momentum to get things done, and that is very much been my focus coming in. So I've sort of tried to look at it from the point of view of what is it that we need to get done in the next 3 years, and what is it that we can actually push to the forefront of the work that we're doing, so that people can have confidence in terms of the investment decisions that some have already made and others are going to be making over the next wee while. So I really hadn't jotted down a lot more than that, other than the role of the Tuesday Club, and we've had this discussion today about how we engage with our communities, because if we look at the standard process of putting out a plan and calling for submissions, and then reading those submissions, hearing those submissions, and then making decisions, then I think if we were to go down that track, then we would not be achieving the sort of vision and the sort of result that we can achieve as a city. So the long-term plan process that I want to lead as the Mayor of the city, and I know Dawn wants to lead as the Chief Executive of the organisation, is to make sure that we've got a process whereby, well, many processes, it's a bit like Share an Idea was multiple platforms where people could engage in ways that suited them, and we want to develop those. So I would like to be able to offer a partnership with the Tuesday Club so that we could engage with you and through you and across you and around you, in order to embrace as many different points of view as possible. And I mean, there's probably lots of different points of view even in the room tonight, but every single one of you is in a whole lot of different networks, and when you think about every group that you are involved in, talk to, engage with, connect with, then you can think about the real difference, the real impact we could make in rebuilding our budget from zero and looking at the way we are as a city, but taking on those serious challenges like climate. And the reason that I mention climate is that people keep talking about it as a threat, and I want us as a city to think about it as an opportunity. If we can't find the solutions to the issues that are not just challenging us but will challenge the world, if we, Christchurch, sort of smart brains of the bottom end of the earth, if we can't think of the solutions, if we can't come up with those solutions, you think of all of the significant contributors to even world history from here, or who have played a role here, then if anyone can, we can. So that's my challenge to you, is to think about how we can use each other in order to engage much more broadly. And if you can come up with a good name for a long-term plan that isn't long-term plan, then I'll be really interested in that too. But yeah, cheers.
Thanks, Lianne.
Questions? God. No.
Good evening. Water chlorination. We've had 5 deadlines come and go, and the 6th one is next year. Are you confident we'll have a 7th deadline?
I'm not confident in terms of the regulatory framework, because I don't know what the new regulatory framework will be. So if we proceed on track as we are at the moment, then, and nothing else changes, then I'm confident that we can take the chlorine out. If the goalposts move again, then I can't give that absolute confidence. The goalposts have shifted 3 times.
Does that answer your question? Should give you a very definite maybe.
I'd love to be able to say that let's take it out, but I can't, because if I say that, we will be told to put it back in, we'll be forced to put it back in. So at the moment, 30% of the water supply, the drinking water supply, is unchlorinated in Christchurch, and 70% is chlorinated at 0.2%. So it is well below the 1% and then the 0.5 that we went to. But the drinking water assessor has been instructed by the Ministry of Health not to sign off the wellheads at the moment. And until the drinking water assessor signs off the wellheads, then we can't take the chlorine out.
You said you've got a great passionate council installed now, and one of the things I really only wanted to vote for was what was their methods, each individual councillor, of doing what you've just said before, engaging in a participatory democracy. Obviously you and Dawn are committed to that. I just wonder how much all the other councillors understand that participatory democracy concept, and how they're going to go about engaging with people in that way.
Well, it's a collective decision. So, and certainly the feedback that we've had so far, and I mean we've been together as a group. How long since the election? 7 weeks, 6 or 7 weeks. So we're working on that together, but I can give you my absolute confidence that that is the feedback that I'm getting from all of the councillors that sit around the table, and there is a real desire to not do things in the same old way, you know, but to actually engage with communities. So that, I mean, at the moment, our strategic priorities, which we have already, which we currently have, the first one on the list is, you know, sort of active citizenship and connected communities. Every single councillor has repeated their desire to see communities taking up much more control of their own future, and that can be done in so many different ways. And I'm just thinking, I actually did a talk about this recently, and the day that I was doing the talk, I was able to report the fact that we had just sold the Governor's Bay jetty to the local community for $1. And we had done that on the basis that they will fundraise, they'll match the money that we've put into the repair, and they will get the job done. And I'll tell you, when you look at all of the ways that that community has fundraised to get the money for the jetty, then that is the most connected and sustainable and actually resilient community that you could possibly imagine. And so finding different ways of getting communities to engage in their own future, that is an absolute priority for every single one of us.
Kia ora, Lianne. I just want to ask, given the criticism of the bureaucracy in Christchurch of late in the report, how can we be assured as the public of Christchurch that the things that the council and the mayor and everything want are going to be lined up by the bureaucrats, and they're going to follow the lead of what the council wants?
Yeah, I wish I had the email that Dawn sent the staff of the organisation, but it starts off by saying that she understands very clearly what people's expectations are of her. But at the same time, she has extremely direct expectations of the staff. And there's some staff in the room, I don't know whether you can help me out, but one of them was that the council elected members, they make the decision on the policy, and it is the council as an organisation's responsibility to deliver. So she has made that crystal clear right from the start that that is the functional role. It is unfortunate that the Ombudsman's report has come out at a time when we've got a brand new chief executive, but this is her view, that it's actually the best time to have it because she can fix the problem. And she can set absolutely crystal clear expectations of the organisation and make sure that that doesn't happen again. And she's been left in a very difficult position because the Ombudsman wouldn't tell her who was the concern in terms of the senior leadership, and he wouldn't tell her what reports. I suspect that one of the reports is the resident survey, which we've discussed here, and I think that what's happened there is that a reporting mechanism, so the way the Residents Association report was put out in the public arena was different last year, I think it was, than it was every year before. And so, and that then got turned around as a result of it coming to light. So I suspect that that was one example of where people felt that information had been inappropriately adjusted so as not to reflect the true nature of the downturn in residents' views that it did in fact represent. And if you can't have a clear comparison between different years, it's really hard to tell when it's gone like that. And it did go like that. And we're building it back up again. So, and that's very much the organisational point of view. But I suspect that was the main one that led probably to more than one complaint. But I don't know because the Ombudsman's not going to tell me either.
Ian, where is the council with the Eden project?
The Eden project is a private proposal for a particular use within the red zone. So as you might have seen, the decisions around the specific projects that will proceed in the red zone are not being made right now, but there is a mechanism for the red zone to transfer its ownership to the council. I think, is it 1 July next year?
2021, I think.
Yeah.
July
2021?
yeah. I think
So it's the beginning of the LTP. Yeah. So, but in the meantime, some of the transitional uses, which obviously will become, transition to permanent use, that opportunity is being developed at the moment in terms of a new governance structure. And I think there's councils out at the moment asking people.
Yes.
Yeah, there's a consultation at the moment.
Yep.
Yeah, consultation as to who wants to go on that group.
Yep.
Yeah. So at the moment it's still sitting there. But if
It's been sitting for a long time.
yes, I know, but there hasn't been a use. Until the plan was signed off this year, it couldn't go any further than that. And with the use now signed off, the regeneration plan, now that it's been signed off by central government, and we know where the ownership's going to lie, although I'm not convinced that we need to be the owners of the land, and I'm not convinced that we need to, or that we need to be the head lease if there's, because there is an idea that's floating as to whether you could have a head lease as opposed to determining the ownership. Yeah, but I mean it's still in a process at the moment, so I don't have a specific answer. But I mean we all love the various projects that are being proposed, and that's obviously one that's had a lot of sway.
Yeah, hello Lianne. There's a lot of interesting stuff happening in the central city, and there's also a lot of land sitting idle, and it's quite clear that people are land banking and waiting for values to rise. And I don't think that for the city as a whole that's a healthy situation. And I know that there have been discussions or thoughts about changing the way land is rated versus the improvements on the land, because at the moment it's very cheap to sit on the land and nothing happens with it because you don't pay much in terms of rates. Where's this discussion at? Is it possible to change the balance between the rating between the land, the empty land, and the value of improvements to encourage development?
Yeah. We can rate on land values only, but we'd have to do that for everyone. So, or we can rate on capital value for everyone. I don't think that you can differentiate, but I'm not 100% sure. So, yeah. But we certainly have looked at whether we could almost put on a punitive rate for those that are land banking, but we're told no, we can't, because you can't. You're charging for services, so you can't charge for extra because they're undeveloped. But whether there is a development rule that we could change under the district plan, I don't know. So I mean, we're still looking at what the options are.
Lianne, I was heartened to hear you say about the community, that you would want to hear more of what the community has to say. In the last few years, community boards have become a useless arm of the City Council. To me, it's been a waste of money. But I actually support them. I think they should be there, but they should be used. And is there any opportunity to have a decent lot of allocated things that they can do, so they become
delegations? Yeah. Look, it couldn't be a better question actually, because during this term we're going to have to do a representation review, which is the structure or the ward boundaries as it were, and the community board boundaries. At the moment we have some community boards which are 3 wards and some community boards which are 2, and then you've got Banks Peninsula, which is about a third of the size of a Christchurch ward. So, in population-wise, not area-wise. So that means that people who run for office at the community board level in Banks Peninsula get a very small stipend. It's very small. So people are actually donating a lot of their time to making their community board an effective organisation. And we're going to have to fix that so that they're all about the same size, except for Banks Peninsula, unless the people of Banks Peninsula say they want to join up with the other boards, but they turned it down. They've turned it down twice now, and I can't imagine that they're going to change their minds, but it does mean we're out for a by-election at the moment on one position, because they are hard to attract people to. So there's that issue. Now what I'm looking at, and this is, I mean, it's so silly when you see sometimes legislation stands in the way of making a sensible decision.
Yes.
If we amalgamated with Banks Peninsula today, so now instead of all that time ago, we could actually then set up local boards which would have their own budgets and do their own thing. But because we're not doing a reorganisation, we can't, which is stupid. So I've had a conversation with a couple of people from Wellington just to test the water, because we think that what we should push for and what would solve the problem is that we can be like Auckland, is that our community boards should be local boards and that they should have the full budgets for their areas, which is all of the capital programs that are delivered in their areas, and then council would be responsible for that overarching city planning and the the metropolitan facilities.
Thanks for that. The other one is pretty more wide stretching, and that is the population of Christchurch. And I spend a lot of time just coming to the city because I don't want to lose it. And I think that most people I speak to of my age and a wee bit younger, they are suburbanised, and yet I hear cries that you're going to allow extension to some community, shopping centres, i.e. Mirabelle. Which is so close to the city, which is absolutely stupid.
Yeah, that is absolutely nuts. But the district plan
will change it.
No, but we can't. I mean,
well, you can move that way.
No, but the Resource Management Act doesn't allow us to. You know, like, I mean, it's just, you know, it is so frustrating when, you know, and this is obviously a communication side of things that we haven't communicated very well. But people assume that you can make decisions because you think they're the right decision to make, when in actual fact, under planning law, you'll just be appealed to the Environment Court, and the Environment Court will settle it anyway. So I mean, it's and when it comes to the malls, with that one, Mirabelle, I couldn't believe it. I mean, it's just,
it's crazy.
No, but we didn't make that decision. It's a commissioner sits there. I mean, there were 2 councillors or 2 community board members that sat on it as well. But essentially, they're governed by the law. And if the law says you don't notify, then there is no ability to listen to submissions from the local neighbours. And it's just hopeless.
The other question is,
but I am hopeful that John Byrne's taking a fabulous judicial review against the decision. So, and that's technically a judicial review against the council's decision, but and that's a good thing.
So I think the other thing you wanted was size of the population. What do you think we'll get to?
And well, how can we increase it? I mean, we need it now.
Increasing the population.
What do you think?
Well, we do need to increase the population. I mean, I think. Well, yeah. I mean, you've raised the issue about the challenges between suburban living, which Christchurch has got very good at, but also the outreaches, which are Waimakariri and so on. And both of those, if we were all one urban city, but they won't. Yeah, I mean, we won't go there. Do not report, Lewis, that I'm going to amalgamate. So if we were to if we were to bring that into the if we were all one urban area, then we would call what's happening out there urban sprawl. Yes. We would, and to be blunt, until we get transport corridors driving development, urban development, then we've got it the wrong way around. So we will continue to have this mistaken way to develop the city. It is a hard place.
Lianne, thank you for coming along and answering many of the questions that I've heard here, similarly as a fellow mayoral candidate. Of course, the biggest change that's likely to happen socially next year is this referendum that's occurring in the general election, and that the announcement that adults will be allowed 2 plants, allowed to smoke at home, is really plausible in terms of some form of change. But one of them is there's to be no smoking in public, but licensed premises within the urban framework. The role of the council in allocating places for, of course, alcohol consumption and banning it in different places also would inform that debate. But I'm interested to hear what the city's interest in this legislative change might be, given it is so socially impacting.
Sorry, I haven't honestly seen the legislation. Have they introduced it?
There's a format for the bill, right, and it makes provision for those constraints. R20.
Is it still in front of a select committee?
No, but so it's still to be worked on. But that's the guidelines.
Sorry, has it been passed? Is it law?
No.
So where is it up to?
It's in the phase where they've said, here are the principles, these are the non-negotiable parts, and they're just bringing on the other players on board, effectively to say, yes, that's what we're going to have as the bill. But it's R20, allowance for 14 grams per person on their, well, it's not really half an ounce. One plant is half. Anyway, one plant's a lot more than that. Two plants per person per household, a maximum of 4 plants per household, and licensed social clubs or premises for the sale of. It's not clear whether social clubs or, but either way, sale of this. Is it going to be? Are we going to have 1,000 metres away from a school kind of scenarios? All that sort of stuff needs to be teased out.
Yeah. I mean, that all needs to be worked out. So I've no idea. And I mean, this usually happens is that central government will pass a piece of legislation and the regulatory impact statement will not mention the impact on local government, and we will be expected as ratepayers to pick up the entire cost thereof.
Yeah.
So, I don't know whether it is us that is going to be asked to police this, or whether the police are going to be asked to police this, or whatever. So let me find out some more information. But I think that the city should have a good debate about the subject.
I agree.
And that presumably what they're going to do is pass the law with it coming into effect with the results of the referendum. Is that right?
That's the proposed scenario.
Because that's the way they did the electoral law reform change, which I actually do think is a good way of doing it, because then everyone, I mean, imagine if the people of Britain had known what Brexit was actually going to do before they voted in the referendum, but there you go. So I think it's a good model, but yes, it would be useful for us to be able to feed in what it will both cost and what the implications are for local government if that were to proceed in that way. Yeah.
Right, thank you. Hey.
Cheers, Lianne. So, of all the sort of looking around the city at the multitude of challenges that we're trying to address, we've got something that strikes me as something that Bruce Irvine said about 2 years ago when he came here and spoke about V-Base. And he said something to the effect that it worked in the days he was running it because they were able to run all the venues in the city together as a city. And looking around, we've got this incredible constellation of groups and entities all doing their things, but we're still working in silos. The community and sector is struggling because the private sector isn't coming to the party and because there's too much red tape. We've got the Christchurch Foundation sitting in one corner. We've got Christchurch NZ sitting in another corner. The private sector is trying to get their long-term projects up and running. We've got all these amazing pieces, but what do you think is the thing that's going to bring them together and actually make this whole system work?
Sorry, you've mixed up a whole lot of people with
Yeah.
The Christchurch Foundation's got nothing to do with Christchurch NZ.
Exactly.
No, but it doesn't need to. It doesn't need to. The Christchurch Foundation was established in order to ensure that there was a mechanism for people to philanthropically give to their city. It's a place-based charitable foundation. That's all it is. So, and in fact, its existence meant that I didn't have to set up a fund after the Moss shootings. I could call on the Christchurch Foundation to do it, and the government didn't have to set up their own separate fund like they did after the earthquakes, because they agreed that the foundation was the right body to give to. So, I mean, it's for a completely separate purpose, so please don't mix it up. If you want to mix it up, then go Christchurch NZ, Regen Christchurch, and Development Christchurch, DCL. So those three I can talk about because they are interrelated and they have formed with Otakaro, which is the government's project management company. They form a sort of a regeneration, rebuild kind of ecosystem. Are there too many agencies? Yes. Did we suggest there should be one? Yes. Is there an opportunity now to move towards that? Yes.
Oh, good stuff.
Except for Otakaro, because I can't control that one.
Nobody can.
Lianne, based on my own experience and many I talk to, I find planners generally to be fairly obstructive rather than supportive of some good developments. Obviously not in all cases. In my particular case, they decided that the district plan was inappropriate and we should be set aside for the purposes of a particular development. I guess my question is, are you happy with the general performance of the consenting arm of the council, or do you have reservations? I was going to ask if Dawn shared your view, but I thought, well, she won't have had time to figure it out.
Well, she has to be the one that gives you the view, because I'm not responsible for the staff of the organisation. Dawn Baxendale is my only employee.
I understand she's your own employee, but you might have an opinion on whether your employee should.
I don't have an opinion. No, I mean, you know, I mean, to be fair, because there does seem to be a misunderstanding. In a governance role, a councillor can't hold a view publicly about the performance of staff. That's not our function. So what we can do is we can set the framework, the policies, the approach, but it's up to the organisation to deliver that. And that's something that the Chief Executive is responsible for in terms of delivery. And I know that there are going to be, you know, sort of, there are enormous challenges facing the city. And the district plan process itself was not a happy one. There were a number of provisions that were inserted in our district plan that were essentially in direct response to the order in council that had been signed off by 2 ministers. You know, so the city's redevelopment and reorientation and redesign has not been entirely in the city's hands. So we have got some challenges in terms of that, but in terms of the particular development issue that you're facing, then I mean, come and have a chat to me afterwards. But I'm not going to express an opinion even to you privately about individual planners. But I will.
I'm not asking for individual planners. I'm asking at the bigger picture. And I suppose my question, which is related to that and to your responses, if councillors and the mayor can't, they must be able to say to the chief executive, excuse me, we're not happy with the performance of the council in this particular area.
We can certainly set her her KPIs, her key
Yeah.
performance indicators, and we can have a requirement of her in terms of the delivery of a certain quality of service. We have levels of service throughout the organisation which she is responsible for ensuring are delivered on. So yes, we can do that, and often often these things come to individual councillors' attention through examples such as your own, and we're able to follow them up from there. But in terms of systemic issues, and there always are in large organisations, we're being pretty clear with our chief executive about what our expectations are.
I think one thing to back up Lianne, Jeff, is that I got on the council to influence the city plan, and I spent 15 years on the council, including 9 as mayor, and I had no impact on the city plan at all.
Hi Lianne. Just to go on from your discussion about long-term plan and climate change, what is the City Council's view on the future of South Shore and South New Brighton, given it's one of the most at-risk areas of single rights in the country? And can you rule out...
I wouldn't actually describe it like that for a start. There are two sides to both South Shore and South New Brighton. One's the estuary side and one's the accreting beach side, and the dune system that sits in front of it. So there are challenges in the area, but there are things that we want to work with those local communities. So the council has not formed a view other than we have existing development in those areas, and we are going to work with people in those areas and all the other coastal environments that we cover in order to talk through what the challenges might be in the future. But I think that one of the skill sets of a resilient community is adaptive management, which means that people themselves understand their own risks and that they understand what the markers might be that might lead to a different planning approach in a particular environment. But we would never go out there and say, we don't think you've got a future, because I do think they've got a future, but it is going to be a different future from the one that they face right now as circumstances change. So, but as I say, the estuary side and the seaward side are two different environments. They're very dynamically different, and I think it's unhelpful to make blanket assertions about areas without working through all of the evidence base that will back up the decision making. That's got to engage those communities. It's not something that people sitting in the ivory tower should be making decisions about. They should work with those communities.
Would City Council rule out, say, a managed retreat of the area?
Well, that's a bit like saying, well, I won't say what it's a bit like saying. But I mean, the media ask me questions like that all the time, and then they go, Mayor denies, and it's just, it's not a fair question. So I'll tell you what the government did after the earthquakes. They did an unmanaged retreat. It was called red zoning. So I'm not going to put anyone through that ever again. I think that was an appalling way of approaching a community under stress and telling them, after making them orange zone, and then some were green zoned and some were red zoned, and I mean, I just think that it's disrespectful of the reality that it's very easy, so let me put it this way, it's very easy if you've got an undeveloped area of coastline, you just don't build there. That's easy. That's really easy. Gosh, I could make those decisions every single day, all by myself. If you have developed communities where people have invested their lives over many generations in many instances, why would you say that you would want to make a decision now when you haven't even begun that serious conversation about what the factual base is for it, what the evidence is, the fact that it's an accreting beach, which does create a different dynamic than anywhere else. You know, so there is just such a lot of work yet to be done, but all of those communities have said to me that they are willing to engage on a collaborative basis on adaptive management, and that's where I want the conversation to go. I've no interest in going to the end point of a conversation before we've even started the front point.
Thank you, Lianne, for coming back one more time. As a retired council planner, I won't get into the debate we've just had, but it does seem to me that, and I think people are starting to realise this from what you've been saying in the last few minutes, that in a way you're working with one hand tied behind your back because of the overall legislative framework that you work within. And a little while ago you talking to a couple of people in Wellington, and I just wondered if you talk a little bit about the links that you have with central government and what chance you see of getting them to see that we are still a special case, not a basket case, a special case, post-earthquake and everything else, and really they need to do something for us, even if it's to get a certain Shane Jones to include us in his large yes and giving some extra dough.
I wish I had that influence, but no. What I want to do is, the last thing that I want to do is to go to Wellington with a begging bowl. No. I want to go with the investment case that backs up the fact that we are New Zealand's second largest city, we are the capital of the South Island of New Zealand, that we are the international gateway to the most favoured tourist destination, one of the most favoured tourist destinations in the world. And so we've got so much to be offering the rest of the country, and I've said right from the get-go that we need to be the counterweight or the counterbalance to Auckland. You can't put all your eggs in one basket. So I'm with you on the end point, which is, but not the ask. The ask is not an ask, it is an investment proposition. Yeah.
Hi Lianne, obviously there was a question before, and judging from letters to the paper, people are worried about chlorine in the water. To me that seems it might not taste too good, but it does no one any harm. But one thing that's well established as beneficial, especially to kids, is fluoride in the water. Is the new council proposing to look at that? My understanding is that local authorities are left to deal with that now. There's no central government policy on it.
Well, yeah, I think that it is up to local authorities, but there was a piece of legislation which was going to shift that from local authorities to the district health boards, but I don't think that legislation actually went through, is what I'm guessing. But no, there's no interest around the council table to add fluoride to the water. I mean, this it actually shows up a wider issue. I mean, whether or not, I mean, I'm personally opposed to it. That's my personal point of view. But I do understand the point of view in terms of the benefit that comes to children. And I've got no objection to fluoride. It's fluoridating the adult population that I have an issue with. I mean, as a child, I had fluoride tablets, so our parents gave us fluoride as children. And to be honest, I'd rather see fluoride tablets given away free in schools for the children, which would do the same, will provide the same benefit that I had without fluoridating the water supply. We don't have a single water supply like other cities. So, I mean, the costs are enormous. The cost of chlorinating is enormous too. So it wasn't something that we had budgeted for at the time, and so we've had to find the resources for that. And then fluoride would be on top of that. You say that the benefit goes to the children in terms of their health, and there is no question about that. Yeah, I accept that. But to take the funding for that from the ratepayers of Christchurch and not from the taxpayers of New Zealand doesn't make sense to me. That the capital value of your property shouldn't be the determining factor for an outcome in the health budget. And this is what I've actually said to the Minister of Health, the Minister of Finance, is that when they talk about well-being and they talk about breaking down the silos with central government, they never think about breaking down the silos with local government. And all of the delivery mechanisms that they ask us to use is actually putting more on the ratepayers of the city rather than the central government. So I've actually asked them to think more of a partnership model in terms of funding some of these things. I mean, if you took, for example, diet and exercise, absolutely correlated with benefits to mental health and to weight, which is directly correlated to type 2 diabetes, and so obesity and type 2 diabetes. That is a cost that's going to hit our health system in a way that I don't think any government has sufficiently planned for. It's massive what's coming. I call it the tsunami of health costs of type 2 diabetes. And if government actually contributed or subsidised the cost of using our sport and recreation facilities, all of our gyms and all of our swimming pools and all of those facilities, if they contributed to that, that would reduce their mental health budget and their potential impact of the type 2 diabetes. So you know, diet and exercise, that's what we do. That's what we do locally. But the government doesn't see local government as really contributing in the way that it does.
Last question.
A couple of people have heard this amusing anecdote that I was telling Gary the other day, and he urged me to get up and say it, but I'm going to preface telling the anecdote by a couple of things, and you'll see why. And I know that, Lianne, you've got a good sense of humour. And I'll preface it by saying that I've worked in the area of migrant and refugee issues for 40 years now. And when Lianne was Minister of Immigration, she was a very good and accessible and informed Minister of Immigration. She's also presided with her council over the launching of the multicultural strategy, which, along with Melbourne, is this city and that city are the only two cities in Australasia that have such a thing. And Lianne's got a wonderful profile. I was trying to think, was it great or as great as that man there? I can't remember, but he also did a lot towards multicultural issues in the city. So a bit of a preface, and my school had the only, and is still the only, school in New Zealand to do cultural orientation, and that was funded via the Labour government when you were Minister of Immigration. And it's still the only one in the country that does this. So here is the anecdote. 2 weeks ago, got into a taxi in Christchurch, said to the fellow, "Take me to public hospital, please." I won't disclose what nationality he was, but he was from overseas, like there are many taxi drivers from overseas. And he was very articulate and interesting, and we had a great conversation. And I said, "Gosh, you've done some training of some sort." And he said, "Oh yes, I'm a computer programmer and I can't get a job, been here for 4.5 years, driving a taxi for 4 years, earn sometimes $6.50 an hour." And he said, "I just can't get an interview." Very sad. And anyway, he was driving along and he came to some cones, and he said, oh, these bloody cones. He said, I wish the mayor would fix them. Fix these roads. Why doesn't she fix these roads? And I said, oh, the mayor's a great mayor. We've got a great mayor here. I said, do you like her? And he looked over at he sort of moved over to me and he looked at me like this and he said, sir, he said, everybody likes Jacinda. Thanks, Jacinda.
Well tripped, sir. Thank you, Lianne. I think it's really important that we acknowledge the fact that we had our city leader here able to answer every question and not giving us a blasé political bullshit answer. And it's really important that we actually acknowledge that. And when the Tuesday Club started, our first speaker was Lianne. And I think it's really important that we give ourselves a pat on the back that we actually, as a city, there's a lot of us engaged. But one of the things I really applaud, Carol was talking about community boards, and one of the things that I think is really fundamentally essential is that Christchurch is made up of something like 52 or 53 villages that came together to make the city. And we've got the future of politics is in the village. The future of the politics is where we as a village engage. Like my village is Edgware. So when I go to Peter Tim's for meat, I'm standing there talking to neighbours. And that talking to neighbours is the sort of thing that we actually have to do. And when you've got little kids, you talk with your friends and your neighbours at school. And I think that that's the thing that the Tuesday Club has really got to reinforce that. Where are our villages and how do we reinforce them? So it's great to hear Lianne tonight say that that's the commitment of the council. The board of Christchurch is committed to the villages, and that's what we've got to get in behind. And so I'd like to thank you, Lianne, for coming along tonight, and thank you for being our leader, and I'd like everyone to put your hands together. As I said earlier on, this is the last Tuesday Club of the year. I'm hoping that people at the bar have cut up the Pam's fruitcake. So there's fruitcake at the bar if you'd all like to take some cake, and Dave Adamson, you're not to have 2 bits. And Dennis Pyatt for pointing out my stomach. I mean, it's pretty bloody rough. But anyway, thank you everyone, and have a good Christmas, and we will see you in February. Thank you.
Give me a couple of days because I had changed phones and I just got a new